Good morning, this is the Eager Beaver Show.
You are listening to a True North Eager Beaver Media Incorporated podcast. The True North Eager Beaver podcasts are proudly brought to you by our founding sponsors, the Misfit Mysteries from Corvid Moon Publishing, your source for science fiction, fantasy, and cozy mysteries featuring a broad diversity of characters, CanadianTarot.com, your uniquely Canadian online eclectic tarot community, and the Peppermaster, hot pepper sauces made from farm-fresh ingredients to thrill your taste buds and expand your mind. Well, good morning and hello, kids, and welcome to season 4 and episode number 398 of the Daily Beaver Morning Show here on the Crier Media Network. Yeah. Today, recording day is Thursday, June 6th, 2024. And we have a very special episode for you here today at the Beaver Lodge because it is the 80th anniversary of D-Day. I am your host, the Eager Beaver, pronouns he, him, hey, Mr. Beaver A, and with me as always is my good friend, Mr. Grizzly. A big thank you goes to our podcast founding sponsors, the Peppermaster, the Misfit Mysteries from Corvid Moon Publishing, and CanadianTarot.com. Mr. Grizzly, how's your mental health today, sir?
You know, all things being equal, which is not truly the case, sadly, but I wish it were, I'm pretty good. I don't know why. I think the brain chemistry is just cooperating right now, and I've been talking for a while about how my life is about to change drastically, and it's been weighing heavy on my mind, my heart, my soul, my psyche, my identity. Like, I'm losing a lot here. And yet today, I'm like, okay. Like, literally, I woke up just, okay. You know, I can only control what I can control. I can't control this. I can only control what I can control, and what I can control is my emotions and my response to it. So it's not just a matter of deciding to accept and move on. It has a lot to do with the brain chemistry working correctly.
Yep.
You know, the serotonin transmitters are spitting them out and the receivers are receiving them. So the reuptake inhibitors, which is sertraline, is working miraculously for me right now.
Woohoo!
And I only got 5.5 hours sleep last night. So I woke up tired, but I'm in good spirits. And it's cloudy, kind of rainy out today.
Mm-hmm.
I'm in good spirits. So let's just roll with that.
Yes, let's roll with that. From my end, mental health is really good. Went to play tennis yesterday. Probably shouldn't have, because at 5'4", I thought I was going to die.
Dude, what were you thinking?
But I won. So I'll take it. things are great at home. I'm hoping to stop in Ottawa this weekend because World League Volleyball is playing in town, and I would like to see Team Canada play before the Olympics, so I might
Mm.
do that. And I have an extra reason to do that because, unfortunately, even though my beaver sweetie had managed to avoid it all this time, yesterday he tested positive for COVID.
Oh, shit.
Yes. So I am wearing a mask indoors. I am going without snuggles, and I am sleeping on the sofa.
Yeah. Sorry about that, dude.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah. So far, I'm fine.
Mm.
But yeah, he, they just had a choral concert, so we suspect it might have something to do with, choir singing and droplets, and there's a lot of rehearsals in the last lead up and stuff, and lots of seniors in the choir, and so maybe possibly, but I mean, we don't know. Nobody has called us to say that they had tested positive to watch out. So
Well,
yeah,
I'm hoping because we just had a massive employee conference where, my location where I'm working, people flown in from all over the world for this.
Mhm.
And yesterday being the busiest day of the week, Wednesday's always the busiest day, but this was like the before times. Literally, and everybody I spoke to who's been there for a while was like, yeah, this is pre-COVID numbers. For A, people in the building, B, people going to help desk, people going here, going there, and just getting around, because yesterday I walked 3.3 kilometers in the building,
Okay.
getting people set up, going floor to floor, because it's a 20-story building, floor to floor to get meetings taken care of, so on and so forth. Each time I'd get in the elevator, it would be jam-packed like the pre-COVID days. So
Okay.
I'm hoping nobody was sick. Even with COVID, it's the what is the you're carrying it, but you're not showing any signs because I can't remember the name of it again.
Symptomatic.
Thank you. Symptomatic. I wanted to say automatic, and I knew that was wrong.
The way to control it's totally automatic. Sorry.
Well,
Automatic.
symptomatic cases, and that nobody gets sick after all of this, because the numbers are starting to spike again with COVID. I've been told so.
Yes, and they're starting to spike. And yesterday, I think it was yesterday or the day before, the government of Ontario announced that, we don't need wastewater testing anymore.
Yeah, thanks, Doug. Jesus
Now,
Christ.
of course, that doesn't really depend on the province. The province was just a coordinating mechanism. Municipalities do that on their own. So hopefully municipalities will #resist and keep doing the wastewater testing on their own, especially since, there are small measles outbreaks. And just a couple of weeks ago, there was a meningitis outbreak here near the Beaver Lodge and all that kind of stuff. So, yeah. But yeah, stupid decisions again, right? They told us to make our own health decisions, and then they remove all the data. So just like you can't pull yourself up from your bootstraps, if you don't have any boots, you can't make an informed decision about your health if you're not allowed access to any data.
Yeah, if people are given the proper information, they usually make the best possible choice. Usually make the best choice. Usually.
Yeah.
But when you don't have any data, how do you make the choice?
Yeah. Now, kits and cubs, there's lots of news, and I know that you guys are waiting for my take on it. But today we are going to set that aside.
We're pushing it off for today. Tomorrow we'll come in hot.
Yep.
We'll come in hot tomorrow.
But today, we have an extremely special episode for you because we have with us Kit Hugh Culliton, who is a military historian and retired Royal Canadian Navy. And the most popular, by far, YouTube video that we have
on our channel
is when Kit Hugh was with us on Remembrance Day 2022 to talk about that. That one had passed the 1,000 viewers on our YouTube page when we were really, really just starting, which was amazing. And because we don't even have 1,000 subscribers yet, although my mental health is doing very good because we had a huge jump. We are at 977 and was at 850 when I went to bed. So I don't know.
978.
Advertising works, I guess. So I
picked up another one during this. We're at 978 now.
Yeah, I'm guessing
979. 2 more since we logged on this morning.
All right. So I'm guessing we might hit that 1,000 before Canada Day. So thank you so much. But back then, uh, Hugh broke the bank essentially for us. We had never been that popular. So we asked him if he would be able to come on today to speak to us about T-Day, and he has very graciously agreed. Now, we're having a couple of tech things now and then. I don't know if he's still with us.
Yeah, he's still here. He's in the
He's
green
still
room.
here? Okay.
Yeah, he's having some
signal,
signal issues, though. So
yeah, signal issues. So the visual might not be great, but I think the audio works
the audio is great. So let's bring him on in, shall we?
Put your paws up. Give a big round of applause for Kit Hugh.
Oh, and now we have no sound.
No.
We can't hear you, sir. The audio was perfect in the green room. Okay, hang on a sec.
Technology.
I will. I'll call him.
Yes.
I'll call him and I'll put him on the phone. So
Yes.
just give me a minute, Hugh, and we'll keep this channel open, but I'll give him a call, and it might be just an audio only interview. So, sir, if you can wax poetic for a moment while I get some things set up on my end, please. Thank you.
Absolutely. Now, one of the reasons I wanted Kit Hugh to come on is because, as a beaver, I've crossed the half a century mark, and it's been a very long time since my World War II unit in history class in high school. So I know D-Day is important. I mean, we all know D-Day is important. But maybe it's been a little while since we've had a refresher on what it meant and what it was about. Now, unlike Mr. Grizzly, I'm not from a military family. My brother has indeed served, but my parents didn't, my grandparents didn't, and that type of stuff. So I'm not from a military family. We learned about the Second World War in history class. There's what I got from movies, and and picking up stuff here and there.
Okay, just a sec. We've got him. We've got Hugh.
Okay.
Hugh, are you there, sir?
I am.
Perfect. Thank you.
To the Beaver Lodge and all the family.
Hello, my friend. How are you today, and how's your mental health?
Je suis très bien, merci.
Pardon?
C'est très bien, merci.
Ah, c'est très bien, merci.
Yep.
Ah, c'est en français.
Fantastique. C'est fantastique.
Je parle un peu. Je suis à travail.
Ah,
tu es au travail. I think I just blew basically my vocab for the day. Anyway, yeah, we're doing okay up here. I've switched berths, as they say in the Navy, so I've shifted berths from Belleville. So I'm now actually based out of Lakefield and looking after my dad right now. He, like Alex, unfortunately, is currently under the weather as well. Not with the same issue, but he's got a bad cough. So I'm just doing my best to nurse him back to health. Anyway. Right.
I'm so sorry to hear him. Please send good. Hold on. Please send him some good vibes for us, because
I will certainly do that.
We are hoping to have Kit Hughes' dad something with him, either pre-recorded or something for Remembrance Day this year, because your dad did serve, correct? Yes.
Kit Hughes' dad, and I'm working on the book that's going to be a 3-part book on him, my grandfather, and my great uncle Laurie. Great uncle Laurie was an RAF group captain. I mentioned him the last time I was on. Mm-hmm. He won the Distinguished Flying Cross. My grandfather was an RCAF test pilot during the war, and he ran the Ontario Provincial Air Service both before and during the war. He's a bush pilot, old school bush pilot from like 1924. And my dad started off in flying in the bush up north in Ontario for the OPAS, and went on to fly Air Canada 747s before he finally retired not too long ago. So the three of them, between them, have about 155 years of flying experience. So and I've got their memoirs, and I've got the background. So I'm just trying to massage that into a text, and I'm reaching out to the Canadian Aviation Historical Society, and Larry Milbury and Dave Hadfield and some of the other guys who've got some background and some information for me and pictures and things like that. So I'm just putting that together.
What remind me, Was your father part of the crew of the Gimli glider?
No, he wasn't. He knew those guys,
He knew them,
and
okay.
he knew both of them very well.
Right.
And it was the Gimli glider. Actually, one of his best friends, Mac McFarlane, ran the newspaper in Selkirk, Ontario, just near Gimli, and was the first photographer on the scene to actually capture the picture of the plane on the end of this drag strip with everybody looking at it funny. They were lucky, actually. The nose gear didn't actually, because they had to do an emergency landing and they didn't have hydraulics for emergency. The nose gear was going against the wind. It didn't quite lock in place, so it skidded along in its nose, which actually slowed it down. It was better braking effect than even if it landed on wheels. But no, I've got a big picture beneath by Ken Glossy somewhere of it sitting there with its nose down and the ramps out and everybody standing around scratching their heads wondering what the heck happened, because it's really interesting. Anybody, well, you're an Air Force brat, so you know
yes.
this.
Oh yeah.
Anybody who's ever been near an airplane or like a jet plane knows that when they come in, sometimes if they're coming towards you like from behind or through terrain, they can really sneak up on you really quickly. Even an F-18, which is louder than anything, it can really sneak up on you quick. So all these people were doing their drag racing, then they turn around, and there's this silent jet just coming right in at them. But 767s don't glide very well.
Hugh, can I ask you? I don't know where it is. Okay, yeah, because on the screen it looks like you're not looking. You're looking sideways.
Say again, your last.
We have your camera is open. We can see you on screen.
Excellent.
So
awesome.
yes.
Oh, okay,
so
great.
we got the audio from your
my
phone.
notes,
Yeah. So just lean over to your left a little bit so we can get you more in frame. There you go. There we go. It's a little blurry, but we've got full audio, so that's the important factor, right?
Okay.
Right.
So we have
some.
we have comments from the kits here. Hugh wishing, sending good vibes to your dad and all that kind of stuff.
I'll pass on the best wishes. Thank you very much, everyone.
All right. Kid Hugh, please, if you would, maybe just refresh us to start with on what is D-Day and why it is that we make a point to observe it.
Certainly. Okay. Now, D-Day is one of these historical pivot points in world history. They come along every now and then. Nobody knows when they come, but it's an inflection point. It wasn't the end of the war by any stretch.
Mm-hmm.
Would the war have been won without it? Maybe. But what it did allow, what did happen on D-Day on June 6th, 1944, 80 years ago today, was without doubt one of the most impressive displays of organization and logistics and training and commitment that we've ever seen in modern history. World War I was a brutal bloodbath. Canada figured out, like the Canadian Army, the Canadian Corps, figured out how to not just survive this trench warfare, as Bill Rawlings wrote about, but how to master it and how to basically how to win it. By the end of the First World War, the Canadian Corps had successively taken on and destroyed over a quarter of the entire German army. That's one corps versus about 85 corps. And they did it one after the other. Hammer blows. The last 100 days of the war, I highly recommend a book by a good friend of mine, Shane Schreiber, Colonel Schreiber from the PPCLI, called Shock Army of the British Empire. That was the Canadian Corps in the First World War. So after the First World War, though, being Canada, we dismantled our military. We went right back down to square one. So we were at the same stage that we're kind of at right now. We've got a small cadre of regular force. We've got reserve units across the country and militia units. Militia being Canadian Army speak for reserve formations, and that was about it. And it's underfunded, undermanned, very quiet. And I mean, right now, I think we'd be lucky if we got 55,000 people in uniform right now. All right. When World War II started up, like in the offing to it, the British were by 1936 realized the war was coming. So they were already starting to ramp up their production, get their stuff together, and figure out how to defend their territories and their empire from the German threat that was rising, because they could see exactly what Hitler was doing. I think personally, this is me, I think Neville Chamberlain got a bad rap because his little scrap of paper, everybody says he was a fool. He wasn't. What he did was he bought time for the British to get their act together and build up their aircraft production and get their organization in place. Now, World War II was fought in phases. The first phase was all completely on the defense. Great Britain didn't lose the war because they were able to defeat the Germans in the Battle of Britain. In retrospect, looking back and knowing what was going on in the Luftwaffe and in the German military, the Germans never really had a smoking chance because they didn't really understand what they were doing. They didn't have an operational policy or an operational plan that was infused through their armed forces about how to fight a war against Britain. They were making it up as they go along, and they were tweaking on methamphetamines. There's a good book about that called Blitzed, and it's about the use of methamphetamine in Nazi Germany. Right. And they're giving out literally like candy to children.
Oh yeah.
Because they had too much work and too few people. So what you do is you just give everybody meth, and then they can work a lot better. But anyways, it's okay until it's not okay. Anyways,
right. So
their organization was organizationally and operationally inefficient and completely messed up. The British, on the other hand, under Sir Hugh Dowding, Air Marshal Hugh Dowding, who got a bad, he got basically cashiered at the end of this and went off to, was the liaison officer to the United States for the rest of the war, which I think is a tragedy because the Dowding system, he basically took fighter command. They broke their entire defense forces, their air forces, into three groups, into bomber command, coastal command, and fighter command.
With fighter command, what they had was sectors throughout Britain.
You need to kill your speakers.
Hugh, your speakers are on.
Yeah.
Oh, did it?
Yeah.
Okay, hang on.
Here, try it now.
How's that?
Yeah, there you go. Better? Perfect.
Okay, good. Yeah, okay. So in fighter command, they broke down the entire English coast into sectors. They had what they called chain home, which is a radar system which allowed them to see the Germans coming in. They were able to create basically an analog computer system for controlling every aircraft and every asset. So they were scrambling aircraft in groups of 2 or 3 that would go out and attack the specific German formations that were coming in. And it allowed them to basically maximize their defense. Okay, so that saved that part of the war. Now, by 1944, things are going badly against Germany. They are getting their asses handed to them by the Russians, who have learned how to out-blitzkrieg them. They were able to go into Russia and roll up a tremendous amount of land. But the Germans, again, didn't realize that logistics is what wins wars. Amateurs study tactics, professionals study logistics. And when you've got a logistics train that is going to be 2,000 kilometers long through territory that is not under your total control, you run into some problems and difficulties. So they ran out of oomph. And by the time that they ran out of oomph, the Russians were able to start rolling them back. So while this is happening in Russia in the summer of 1944, the Allies, the Western Allies, are being screamed at by Russia, who's doing a lot of the dying, to open up a second front. Mm-hmm. Their first attempt at this was, of course, North Africa in Operation Torch, where the Americans, when they first came into the war in 1902. But then after that, we moved off to the first time that the Canadians actually got heavily involved, and that was the invasion of Sicily, Operation Husky. And that was the seaborne assault on Sicily. A lot of lessons were learned there, including how to drop paratroopers, because a lot of paratroopers got dropped over the ocean and drowned on their way in. So, but anyways, the Canadian Army we had 2 divisions that were deployed there. Turned it into a small corps. And that's where the Canadian military and leadership really got their operational training and understanding about how to both work with a coalition and coalition warfare with the British and the Americans, as well as how to fight and win against the Germans. And of course, it was a brutal grind up the peninsula in the boot of Italy. In fact, one of my cousins, Fred Culliton, is buried in Cesena Cemetery, where he was a forward observing officer with the it was a Eastern Ontario regiment. But he was a forward observing officer directing artillery fire, and he got hit by a German 88. Anyways, so we have all these lessons learned. Now, while that's going on, the Canadian Army is also building up its forces incredibly in Britain. Britain has become basically the unsinkable aircraft carrier assault ship off the coast of Nazi Germany and Nazi-controlled Europe. And so the Germans know that they're going to be coming eventually and sometime. They set up as best they can through the TOT organization a system of defenses that they call Festung Europa, or Fortress Europe. So basically a series of interlocking defensive positions with artillery and mines and...
Oh no, we lost.
Oh no!
It froze just as he was getting to the best part.
Oh.
It took them up until about the 9th zone.
Hugh. Sorry, you froze after you said they had artillery. We didn't hear anything.
If you defend everywhere, you're defending nowhere, and they didn't know where the landing was going to come. Now, while this is going on in 1943-44, and the Germans are fighting hard against the Russians are again screaming for the Canadians, or for the Allies to do something. So that's why we get to the Dieppe raid. Dieppe was a combined operation between Britain and Canada. Canada supplied most of the infantry forces, some of the naval forces, but it was under the overall command of Mountbatten. Was, for better or worse, he was a dilettante. It was a debacle. They got bounced going in. The formation of ships that were going in to do this massive, huge raid got bounced by a German convoy, a coastal convoy they didn't know about. They didn't do proper research or reconnaissance beforehand. The beach is what they call shingle. So, like, you know, those big round rocks you see down on like the Lake Ontario there, like that really loose stuff that's really hard to walk on. That's basically what the beach at Dieppe was, which meant that the tanks couldn't do anything. There was a 6-foot seawall at the end of the beach that they couldn't climb. They didn't have any way of breaching it. And both ends of the beach were covered from heights with artillery and machine guns, and it turned it into what they call an enfilade, or an enfilade fire zone. So basically they're getting hit by fire from the front and from both flanks. So it was a debacle. We lost a lot of people. The division that fought there, 2nd Canadian Division, was the one that was supposed to be in the main landing at D-Day in 44. They were burned out. Their entire force had to be rebuilt, and so 3 Canadian Division under Keller was tasked with doing it. So the one lesson that they learned from this, so they really shouldn't have had to learn, because I mean, the lessons that they were learning were known throughout history. I mean, it was just basic common sense. You do prior reconnaissance, you learn where the enemy is, you figure out what you need to do, and then you deploy your forces in the most efficient way possible in order to meet those objectives and support them. Well, anyways, it caused the British and the American and Canadian, the high commands, to go back and to plan from scratch and to say, right, we really have to do this differently. So from about 1943 on, the war enters a different perspective. Like in the First World War, up until about 1916, it was amateurs running the show, and people like pulling ideas out of their butts and trying to make everything work. By 1917, it had turned into a professional organization. Same thing in the Second World War. It takes a few years for your systems to build up, to get the right people with the right experience and training into the right positions in order to make the thing work. By the time that summer of 1944 came around, we had an incredibly precise plan. Like the operation order for Operation Overlord, which is the entire invasion of Europe. It was broken down into two parts. It was broken down into the landing, and there was also Operation Neptune, which was the naval portion of this. The operations order ran, I think, about 900 pages. It read like the Bible,
Whoa.
like absolutely everything, down to how you're going to load ammunition and food and supplies into the landing craft, so that when the guys hit the beach, they've got the things they need first right away, and then as they move in, then they've got
Right.
the access to everything. So they had a very, very good organization down. In order to do this, they realized from Dieppe that they had, like, anytime you're launching an assault, it's got to be it has to be overwhelming. You have to apply a lot of force, because one defender can usually stand up against maybe 2 or 3 attackers, especially when they're coming in without cover against a defended position and expected. So what do? They used deception. Patton was given a fake army made up of inflatable tanks, as we are now seeing it used in Ukraine, by the way, to attract drones away from actual assets, in the north of England, so that it looked like maybe they were going to hit right across the coast at Pas-de-Calais, which is where the Germans thought that they were going to come, and the British and the Americans did their absolute best, like the Allies did their absolute best, to convince them of that. Part of warfare is deception. It's one of the basic cardinal rules of war. Best way to do that is to make the enemy believe what they want to believe. Don't try to make them believe something they don't want. You want just, if they think you're going to go to Calais, you put things out there like bombers and reconnaissance aircraft and ships off the coast, and you make it believe that that's where it's going to be. And that's what they did. About a quarter of the Allied tactical air assets that were deployed against France in advance of the Normandy landings were deployed well away from Normandy. They were going north, they were going south, they were going all over the place, so that the Germans didn't know where this was going to happen. That the only chance they had was to maximize their ability to be unexpected. Now, going back to, so that's the background here. If we want to look at this, I think the best way to talk about the entire battle is to look at from the perspective of the 3 branches. So you've got an air component, you've got a land component, and you've got a sea component. I'll start with the sea component because I'm a sailor. The Operation Neptune was, at that point, the largest naval assault and largest naval force ever assembled in human history. There were well over 7,000 different vessels involved. About 250 of those were Canadian. Remember also that at this point in time, Canada was the force that was in charge with transporting and all the supplies safely across the Atlantic. So the United States Navy wasn't in charge of Atlantic operations, despite what that horrible Tom Hanks movie about the destroyer says. If that were an actual real movie, the Canadian corvettes would have been the scoper or the senior ship present and giving the orders. Wouldn't be an American on his first tour, because they didn't know what they were doing at that point in the war. But anyways, I digress. So the Canadian Navy is, which at this point is also the 3rd largest by number of ships in the world, is tasked with maintaining the lines of communication across the Atlantic, taking out and hunting and killing all the submarines. And by this time, we're getting very, very good at that. We still also have an offensive force that is used tactically. So destroyers like Haida and Huron and Algonquin are going to be along the shore with their 5-inch and 4.7-inch guns, lending fire support, pinpoint fire support. Everybody thinks, well, battleships are great, but a 16-inch battleship round, they're impressive as heck, because it's like 3,000 pounds of Volkswagen going over your head at about 2,500 feet per second. They only can do so much, and they're not very accurate. For taking out beach defenses in order to support the landing, in order to suppress positions, they needed a lot of firepower from smaller ships that could direct it very quickly. And so they had to build an organization between the ships and the shore, the beach masters and the landing craft, in order to organize this entire system. Absolutely phenomenal organization. The entire invasion had to be led first, though, by minesweepers. The Germans had mined the entire channel. And we're talking like those big old mines there with the horns all over them that you punch into and they blow up and things like that. They were all over the place. So what they had to do is they had to send in under fire a force of minesweepers to sweep the channels ahead of them, lanes ahead of the landing craft, so that they could actually get into the beach. One of the pictures I shared with you, I don't know if I shared with you, I probably should have, and I didn't. But anyways, they had to set up an organization and a navigational system where each beach had lightships way out in the middle of the channel that were anchored in specific spots. So when the landing craft came in, they knew exactly where they were going. So they basically, like an airport, sorts you out into which flight you're going into. All these ships are coming across. It's rough as heck because well, we'll get into the weather in a bit, but so they had to do all this, and they had to do it very quickly, and they had to do it in the dark, and they had to do it before the landing ships were able to get there while they were still underway. D-Day was not supposed to happen on the 6th. It was supposed to have gone in about a week before, but because
the weather, yeah,
over the North Atlantic, and weather usually goes from west to east, does here in the Northern Hemisphere. They had to wait for proper conditions because the Normandy coastline is an exposed oceanic coastline. You get some of the largest waves in Europe in the North Atlantic, or from the North Atlantic, because it gets channeled in, it gets funneled in, and as it shelves and shallows, these waves build up into massive, huge swells, and you can't land ships, you can't land troops safely if you've got too rough a sea. They had to wait for the right conditions.
Do you not find the irony in that, though? Can't land them safely because they're about to march into machine gun fire.
Yep. Well, that is even secondary at this point. Right now, we just have to get the guys to the beach. Before that happens, you have to prepare the beach for the landing. How do you do that? Okay, that's where the Air Force comes in, and where a big, huge bun fight happened about a couple months previous, 3 months previous, where Bomber Harris, like Arthur Harris, who is he's the Air Marshal in charge of Bomber Command, including 6th Group, which was the Canadian Air Force portion of the heavy bomber force. His primary mission and purpose in life is to reduce Germany to nothing. He realizes very quickly on, because he's a very pragmatic man, that his bombers, unlike the Americans who think that they've got this really tricky-dicky Norton bomb sight that can hit a pork barrel from 35,000 feet, which it never could. It just didn't work. And they believed in daylight bombing so they could beat precision, and really tight formations of bombers so they could cover each other off and protect each other from enemy fighters and things like that. Well, anybody who's seen that show Masters of the Air, it didn't work out very well. Their American attrition rates, and even Bomber Command attrition rates early on in the war, while they were learning these lessons, were on the order of infantry at the Somme in 1916.
Wow.
Like,
for people who don't know what that is,
if you were like a 30 mission tour, which is what was expected in the RCAF, you had a 1 in 25 chance of actually making that. It wasn't a matter of if you're going to get shot down or injured or killed. It was a when. And yet these guys still got in these planes, and they're like, I had the honor when I learned how to fly. My flight instructor was Frank Montgomery, who was I think he retired. He was a squadron leader, so like a major. He was a Pathfinder pilot flying a Mosquito bomber, twin engine wooden bomber, over Germany to mark the targets with flares and white phosphorus bombs and things like that, so that the bomber streams coming behind him, the Lancasters and the Halifaxes, would be able to see where the targets were. That was dangerous work. The man was like, he didn't fly a plane. He just put it on, strapped it on, and wore it like you and I would wear socks. It was pretty awesome to watch him fly. Anyways, So so Bomber Harris's job is this. He sees strategic bombing as being the only way that they can use that force to bring the most hurt to the enemy as possible and end the war as quickly as possible. He's extremely pissed off at Eisenhower for demanding that Bomber Command gets taken off of this and put on to preparation for Normandy. So there's a major fight there. But Harris, being a professional, he puts up the fight as best he can, but when he's given his marching orders by his bosses, he says yes sir, and he gets on with it, and he does it very, very well. A German officer, an Oberst Hans von Luck, he wrote a book about, well, I think it's called Panzer Commander, but he was in Normandy as a what was it? It was Kampfgruppe von Luck, so fighting group von Luck. So he had an amalgamation of forces, mostly based around some tanks and some armored personnel carriers and things like that. He described one of these heavy bomber attacks behind the line into the area like where the reserve troops were forming up at Normandy, and he said it was absolutely overwhelmingly stunning. There were tanks by the time the bombers were done. There were 80-ton tanks and vehicles that were flipped over on their back. People were just wandering around in a stunned fog, bumping into trees, and it was he said it was completely devastating and demoralizing. Now, so that's what they're doing. So they're using the heavy bombers to destroy communications between the rear areas where the Germans have their reserve forces, 2nd or 21st Panzer Division, which is a very good division. The friggin' Hitler Jugends under Kurt Meyer, who should have been shot as a war criminal. He executed some Canadian prisoners he caught. And a few other of these formations there. So they basically are creating a barrier of destruction between where the enemy supplies and support troops are and where their forward units are. So you basically are isolating the forward elements from their support. Once they've got that done, and they're doing that in about a week beforehand, and remember, they're also doing this all the way up and down the entire seaboard because it's important to make sure that the deception stays in place and to keep the Germans believing that's going to be Pas-de-Calais as long as humanly possible. While that's happening, they've got their forces lined up and mustered in Portsmouth and every little port along the southern part of coast of England. 7,000 ships filled with troops, filled with equipment, filled with artillery. There's some that were specifically designed for this operation. You might have heard of something called a funny tank. There were these things. If you go up to the War Museum in Ottawa and you get a chance to look, there are these Sherman tanks there with these canvas screens that they would put up like awnings around them and seal them off, sort of. And then they could float these tanks with a little motor on the back there, a little propeller at the back there. So they would swim into the shore so that when the soldiers were ashore, they realized that they needed tank support, armored support right away in order to take out and clear the pillboxes, the artillery positions, and suppress the enemy while the soldiers moved in to breach the defenses and get in behind them. Not all of those guys made it ashore, especially in rough water, because the freeboard on them was about 6 inches. And I don't think you need to know that a Sherman tank doesn't float very well, and they go and they're down to the bottom. Most of these guys who were driving were actually, I met one of them from the Ontario Regiment? Yeah, he's the Ontario Regiment down in Oshawa. He said, yeah, we rigged up boards and everything so we could steer and control them with our feet, so we would be sitting on the deck so that when the thing sank, we might have a chance of getting out. Anyways, so they get those in shore. They have other tanks that have massive, huge fascines on them to breach the seawalls. They've got other tanks that are designed, well, they're equipped like with flamethrowers, with 240 millimeter spigot mortars, things like that. Like they did the amount of detail that went and planning that went into D-Day is off the charts, and it was successful. We had 5 beaches. The Americans were in the south. Britain was just to the north and to the south of the Canadian at Juno. So it was Gold, Juno, Sword, Utah, Omaha. I think I got those backwards, but those were the code names for the beaches. Each of them had a specific task and a specific operation. On the Canadian sector, it was 3 Canadian division that was tasked with the landing. Of 3 Canadian division, you had the well, I think it was they did it. When you do a military operation, usually it's, think of triangles. You will either have a situation where if you're advancing to contact, you will have 1 up and 2 back, as they call it. So you've got a formation, 1 formation in front that will make contact with the enemy, and 2 formations behind on either side of them, so you can maneuver them to assault the position once it's fixed in place by the company or the unit in advance. Or you have 2 up and 1 back. Usually for 2 up and 1 back, which is what they did at D-Day, that is for maximum shock. What we're talking about when you do an assault like this is, well, Schwarzkopf called it shock and awe. It's shock warfare. It really, really is as brutal and basic as football. You are literally pushing and marching people forward into the fire, getting them as far forward as possible, as fast as possible. Your only way that you're going to not die in greater numbers is if you get people off the beaches, get them under cover, and get them through the enemy defenses as fast as possible. So they went up with that. So there was the 3rd Canadian Division with 7th Armored Brigade as an armored force that was in support of them. Offshore, you had battleships, everything from battleships all the way down to landing craft filled with rockets, and even 25-pounder like land-based artillery guns that were coming in to the beach. These guys were firing rounds in just to thicken up the barrage as they were going into the beach, and probably weren't going to hit anything, but it keeps the enemy's head down and suppresses them until you get your troops as close as possible to them. Anybody who's ever been around a rifle range or has ever served like in the military and done the work where you're in the butts when you're doing a range shoot knows that, like, when bullets are flying past you, it sounds like a firecracker or a whip being cracked by your head. Bigger bullets are louder, smaller bullets are sharper, but you hear all the snap, 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 snap going off all around you. That is so it doesn't matter if you're actually hitting the enemy in some situations, as long as you are suppressing their positions. If you've got the guys in their bunkers who are scared to go up and look out their slit windows or shoot out because there's concrete dust chipping in their face there, and they hear all this noise going on, that's okay. That's perfect, because that will allow you to get your troops up as close as possible to drop satchel charges and grenades into it or flamethrowers and to destroy these positions. So there was some the only issues, Canada did really well at the beach. We were able to get through the beach. We were able to get into the towns and get through the enemy defenses fairly effectively and quickly on the first day. We were able to make our objectives. The Americans to the south, where they were actually going up against a fairly steep cliff, had some more difficulty, as seen in Saving Private Ryan.
Right.
That sometimes in history classes, just the first portion of that movie, and I call it Omaha Beach. Aren't you glad you weren't there? Like as much as you can ever get anything real from a movie, because you don't have the smell, you don't have the actual overpowering sound, you don't have the fear and the sense of dread of what you're doing. Because if you've ever walked, or if you ever get a chance to walk on the beaches of Normandy or Dieppe, the very first thing that strikes you is how flat and open it is everywhere. There is no cover anywhere. So the moment that door falls down and you guys are walking out through the surf ashore, you're alone.
Yeah.
It's
completely alone.
I've never done that, but I can only imagine how terrifying it would be. You're suddenly you're there, and you don't have any cover, you don't have anything to do except go forward as fast and as far as you can and hope for the best. It's you basically what these guys were doing, like sometimes like when it's raining and people put their heads down and walk into the rain. That's what they were doing. MG 42s, the standard German machine gun, had a cyclic rate of fire of 600 rounds a minute of 8mm ball ammunition. So that's 192 grain bullets that are flying out at about 2,500 feet per second. 600 a minute. You do a barrel change and you can keep up that rate of fire all day. So it doesn't take a lot of guys who have got a defended, protected and armored position and enough ammunition. Unless you can get past that, they're going to win. Rommel said this right off the bat when he set up, and it was Erwin Rommel who planned most of the at the senior level. I mean, it was engineers that actually did it all, but he planned most of the beach defenses and the way that they were going to lay out their defense for Fortress Europe. He realized
Germany,
the only way
that's
that
Germany,
we're going to
right?
get this, or the only way we can win,
Hugh,
is
Hugh,
if we stop
Hugh.
them right at the
You can't
tide
hear.
line. We cannot let them get past the beach. Once they get inland, we're screwed. You can't do anything about that. So his focus was to ensure that the forces required were as far forward as possible, so that they could react very quickly and reinforce the areas that needed to be reinforced as quickly as possible. Didn't work out that way for a couple of reasons. Going back to what I said at the beginning, this is a war effort being run by meth heads. They, like Hitler and his political leadership and the military leadership, were a bunch of yes men that were reporting to him. The making the Führer happy was vastly more important than actually ensuring that the operations were carried out successfully. I mean, people say that Germans are very efficient and everything. Well, not so much in the Nazi command. They lost the war for very sound reasons. One of which was their logistics and their ability to coordinate a national war effort was not great. For example, a Heinkel 111 bomber from, say, late 1930s, early 1940s that they used to bomb Britain in the Blitz. They cost approximately $2,000, or sorry, 2,000 Reichmarks to build, say. The survival rifle in them was a handmade drilling, because Hermann Göring liked hunting and everything. So it's a double barrel shotgun rifle with a single rifle barrel underneath. A beautiful thing. But those things all by themselves cost about 15,000 Reichmarks. So you're putting as a survival weapon for a bomber that might crash. You're putting a weapon that is more valuable and more resource intensive than the entire friggin' airplane that it's supposed to be working for. So these were sort of their problems. Same with their armor and their tanks. They didn't design things with reliability and maintenance in mind. A lot of people denigrate the Sherman, saying that it wasn't as good as a German tank. Well, it was, because one, what is it that the Russians say? Mass has a quality all its own, or quantity has a quality all its own. Same thing with the Shermans. They had an industrial base. Canada was pumping them out like crazy. America was. Everybody was using them. So all the equipment standardized. So it was Canadian, British, American, doesn't matter. Everybody's got the parts, so they can help each other out. All these tanks are easy to service. You can do an engine swap on a Sherman, and a lot of them are using aircraft engines, actually. You can do an engine swap on a Sherman in maybe about 2 or 3 hours. German, you had to put it on a trailer, put it on a train, take it all the way back to the factory, and it had to be taken completely apart, re-engined, whatever done, and then put back in the field. It was incredibly inefficient. Plus, by that time, by 1944, because of Bomber Command, because of the way the war was progressing, they didn't have access to the strategic materials, copper, aluminum, and various metals like magnesium and things like that they needed in order to keep up their production. So, all right, so we get to the beach. We've got our Canadians ashore. They're moving inland. While this is going on, now we see the tactical Air Force coming into play. Just like during the Blitzkrieg, the Germans used, and they didn't invent it, because basically what you see in the Second World War is all the concepts, the operational concepts and tactical doctrine that was developed in the First World War being employed with vastly more efficient weapon systems and training and a procedure, a doctrine that so everybody knows how to do this. In the First World War, you had fighter bombers, saw up with camels and things like that, strafing enemy positions behind the line, dropping occasional bombs, things like that. Okay, now in the Second World War, we've got Hurricane Mark 3 and 4s with 4 20mm cannons and bombs. The Hurricane, by that time, not the best frontline fighter, but certainly a very rugged airplane and a very effective ground attack airplane. We've got the Hawker Typhoon, which is the sort of like the son of Hurricane, and those things are absolutely amazing. It's got a Napier Sabre engine in it, a little problematic at first, but it's a 24-cylinder engine. Basically, take 2 Merlin engines like what you have in a Spitfire or a Hurricane, and you cut the crankshaft in half and you put them all together there. So you've got basically two banks of 12-cylinder engines there. So you've got like over 3,000 horsepower with the superchargers, able to loft an ungodly amount of firepower, including 2-inch and 4-inch rockets, as well as bombs, as well as 4 20mm cannons with a lot of ammunition. One squadron of Typhoons would have the broadside effect of a heavy cruiser. So they had a lot of this firepower. And the best thing is, you've got radio communications and a system in place between the ground guys and the air and the ships out at sea. Everybody has their buddies. And so the forward observing officer, when he's going forward with the troops, runs into an enemy entrenched position, got machine guns or an artillery piece, and it's starting to chew up and it stopped them. Okay, you call in a destroyer, and you know your destroyer because you know these guys. You've been working with them and training with them in the lead up to this. You know the ship that you're dealing with, and they know you. So the units were sort of teamed up with each other. And you call in support, and that support comes in. And a lot of these destroyers were actually getting really close to the shore. Like there were a few of them that almost grounded because they want to get in close enough to make sure that they're laying in as much fire as possible. When you get in that close, not only do you have your main guns off of a destroyer, but destroyers also have a lot of anti-aircraft weapons, which are also very effective in an anti-personnel shore bombardment effect. So a 40mm Bofors, which is an automatic 40mm gun, fires shells about that long and about 40 millimeters in diameter, high explosive and self-destroying tracer, and range out to about 4,000 yards, easy. And they're firing those things one mount, like one single gun will fire maybe about 25 rounds a minute. And so you've got these quad mounts of these things there. 20mm cannons. You're just changing the boxes on them. And because they're shipborne, you can have water-cooled systems as well. So there's a whole pile of naval ordnance that is going over the heads of these guys who are coming in through the beach there and keeping the Germans in place while they're advancing. Once they are inshore and they're out of range of the ships, that's where the tactical Air Force came in. You've seen pictures of these aircraft if you get a chance, and you'll know they've got what they call invasion stripes on them, because airplanes, like when you're a soldier on the ground, you see an airplane, you generally assume that it's probably not going to be friendly, so they have tendency to shoot at them. So what they did for all of the Allied aircraft is they put white and black stripes on the bottom of them, so everybody knew whose side they were on. At that point, they weren't worried about stealth. They weren't worried about hiding from the enemy. They were there to lay a beating on them. So they wanted to make sure that they didn't have blue on blue firing instance or what they call friendly fire. It ain't friendly, but it's blue on blue situation. So you've got these aircraft that are coming in. Now, these aircraft are also being vectored and directed by either guys on the ground or guys in smaller airplanes who are orbiting around. The little Taylorcraft Oster with a straight 6 little Gypsy Major engine in it was a what they call a STOL airplane. It was short takeoff and landing. So it's a nice little plane. My dad actually rebuilt one when I was a kid, and I think it's, where the heck is it now? I think it's down in Titusville. Anyways, so they've got a pilot who's flying around, and they've got an observer who is directing and coordinating the air assets. So basically, you've got air traffic control over the zone here, so that while when one formation is coming in to lay waste on a target, other formations are circling up above there, waiting to be vectored in to do it. And they're coming in from different directions. They've got their doctrine down so that the enemy doesn't know where they're coming from, so they can't, so not flying into it. defense is like when, especially with aircraft, is non-linear. The more airplanes you have around that are attacking from different directions, the way more hard it makes the defense solution to target them coming in. You get overwhelmed very quickly. So that's what they're doing, and that was from pre-dawn to after sunset on the first day. Now, what is the? I guess I've been babbling along here for a while, so I'm just gonna I'll just go on here, and I'll give you the prologue, I guess. The D-Day was, as I guess to quote Churchill, it wasn't the end of the beginning, it wasn't the end, but it was certainly the beginning of the end. What D-Day did was it ruptured the German ability to control their territory. From the time of June 1944, the war only lasted another 10 months. Could have been a little bit quicker if there were mistakes that were still made, Market Garden being a major one, where they tried to do too much too fast and they got overconfident. But because of D-Day, the German, everybody who actually was paying attention or actually understood anything about,
Hello. Hi there. Can you hear us?
Yeah. I don't know why.
No, it's Hugh.
Okay.
Stop for a second. Stop for a second.
By the end of the Normandy operation, the German army was functionally in the West was functionally destroyed and annihilated. It was a fraction of its former self, and it was never able to again maintain a strategic initiative. What they did at the Battle of the Bulge was shortened the war because it was a last ditch and it was pointless. By the end of the Normandy operation, by the end of the Norman summer, by August 1944, every German officer, every German soldier, anybody who actually had a wit about them knew that they were screwed, that it was over, it was done, and there was nothing left to do except to surrender. The fact that they didn't was because they were being led by a bunch of methed out fanatics. But so if D-Day has any major value, and it does, is it's the strategic effect it had on absolutely splitting and dividing the German ability to defend their homeland. After the landing, they were on the strategic defensive and retreat all the way back to Germany. The Russians at this point with Operation Bagration, had kicked their butts out of a lot of Russia proper. They're moving them back rolling them back through the Ukraine and inflicting millions of casualties on them. I mean, it's what happened on the Eastern Front is absolutely worth its own story. There's a really good book done by an American officer right after the Second World War, who's a fluent German speaker, and he interviewed a lot of the German senior officers. Yes. Hello. Yep. Oh, okay. You can hear me now. Awesome.
No.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Awesome. We could hear you the whole time. That wasn't the problem.
Oh, I'm sorry.
You can't hear us.
I can hear you now. All right. Well, I'll make it quick and I'll wrap it up then. Okay. The thing is with it, this was the Malachi crunch that slammed the Germans. How's that?
Okay.
Did I screw everything up?
No. It's just that we couldn't ask you questions.
Oh, I'm sorry.
You were saying things, and we were trying to intervene to get more details about certain things that you would just. So we couldn't. It just Okay. So it was a logistical, one of the greatest logistical endeavors in human history, and Canada did very well because we very much punched above our weight in this in these events. So we have the landing, and we got behind the defenses and all that kind of stuff. why I want to get the kids in a sense of why it was important to do this and why this day was seminal or very 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 special, even like transformative in Canadian history, and how Canada was perceived on the world stage before and after this.
Putting it in that context, this was the first war that Canada fought as an independent country. During the First World War, when Britain went to war, we went to war automatically. In this war, we declared war on Germany, and we went to war as an independent country. By the end of this war, Canada had the third largest navy on earth, behind the British and the Americans. We were the theater commanders of the entire Atlantic. We were in charge of all the anti-submarine operations, and we destroyed about 75% of the entire U-boat fleet. We had an army of professionals. The Norman Summer, as it's called, was where the British and the Canadians secured took the brunt of the German attacks and destroyed them in place, while the Americans launched Operation Cobra to the south and basically gave them a right hook around, and they rolled them all up. We almost completely destroyed them at the Falaise Pocket. There were some issues there, and some of them escaped, but it didn't really make much difference, except it just might have lengthened the war by a month or so. At the end of this war, Canada wasn't just a junior partner in an alliance. We were an independent country with a reputation, and we were seen on the world stage as being equal in every way possible, not size, but certainly politically and morally, to the United States, to Britain, to other countries that were involved. We were part of the family of nations, as it were.
So we got invited to the big players table.
Because of our participation and the sacrifices that the nation made in the Second World War, the United Nations came about. That would not have happened without Canadian involvement. Pearson, for example, peacekeeping, the idea that collective defense is the best way to prevent wars in the future. Without the Canadian involvement in the Second World War, would we have had a Third World War? Maybe. Possibly. I don't know. That's what ifing. So you can't really do that in history. Right. But we certainly punched above our weight during the conflict, and certainly afterwards. My fear that we're kind of been resting on our laurels for too long, and we need to actually boost that up a bit, especially given climate change and what's happening in our Arctic. It's time to start getting serious about defense again. We can no longer, like in the 1930s, it was said that Canada is inflammable materials in a fireproof house, far from danger. We're not like that. That wasn't true at the time, and it's certainly not true now. Yeah. Our interests are completely interlocked and intertwined with the rest of the world. We learned a lot of those lessons on the beaches of Normandy.
All right. So Canada punched above its weight. It gained respect internationally. It was sort of our, for lack of a better term, coming out party in terms of being a player on the world stage. A lot was asked of us, and we did a lot. I think I remember reading somewhere that relative to, proportionally to the size, I don't know what you call them.
The Canadian war effort,
battalions or whatnot. Yeah, the size of the war effort. Canadians probably took the biggest hit.
We certainly had, we didn't take in terms of overall casualties or percentage of casualties. No, we did certainly.
Proportionally speaking.
Proportionally, yeah. The Russians. Well, nobody's really sure how many millions of people they lost. True. But it was well over 12 million people, both military and civilian. But we certainly, our casualties weren't as heavy as they were during the First World War, because we did better planning, and we had a different philosophy. In order to avoid becoming cannon fodder, we turned our military into our national war effort into not just a military war effort, but also a logistical and training exercise. I didn't mention the British Commonwealth Air Training Plan, which allowed Bomber Command and allowed all these aircraft to actually be used as effectively as they did. But everywhere across the country in Canada, there were air bases that were constructed, and people from all over the world, Americans, Commonwealth, Canadians, New Zealanders, Australians, would come here and would learn how to fly and would trained how to operate as a strategic and a tactical air force.
Mhm.
And
I think I live near one.
Oh yeah, you do. You do.
Yeah.
You live near about 3 of them, actually.
Yeah.
There's 2 down in, well, there's Trenton, of course. There's one down at Mountain View in the county. There's one over, it's called Mohawk, but it's down by Deseronto there in Tyendinaga. They're scattered all over the country.
But close to where I live, close to where I live. Yeah, but close to where I live in Kingston specifically, I heard that like right close to my house, there was a landing strip originally.
Yeah. Actually, you're in the north end there. Yes, there was. They and so all these training locations, the Air Forces as well. They rotated all their flight crews, so their combat crews through it, rather than like the Japanese had this problem during the Second World War. They would put their pilots, who at the beginning of the war were probably the best in the world, into their combat formations until they died, and then they didn't have them anymore. What the Americans and the Canadians and the British did was they made sure that when after a certain percentage of time, they would take some of their best operators out of the squadrons and send them back, like my Uncle Laurie did this, and give them a training base so that they could be in charge of ensuring that the new lessons that are learning, because remember, war is always an evolution of everything. The defense changes, so the offense has to change all the way through.
Right. So
the most recent lessons learned are being taught to the people who are coming into the fore. That's why we were able to by 1944, 1945, absolutely devastate the Luftwaffe. They were still able to put up some planes, and they're still able to make planes, but they didn't have any pilots left at the end of the war enough to do the job.
Gotcha.
And frankly, their aircraft, like everybody talks about, the wonder weapons and things like that, all that did was dilute their resources away from things which would actually have helped their war effort more. I mean, people look at the Bismarck and say, wow, what a beautiful ship. That's great. I'm like, well, Bismarck and Tirpitz, they could have made 25 subs each for the amount of metal and construction that went into those ships. It was a vanity project. Nazis were all about flash and the look. They were not about the structure, the logistics, the training, the boring stuff that actually wins wars. If that was one thing that Canada did really well, it's that we figured out how to build a system to create victory and the conditions for victory.
Mm-hmm. So the Germans looked fierce, and looked scary, especially with the uniforms, because those uniforms were something.
Hugo Boss made good uniforms. I mean, you got to give them credit where it's due there. I mean, silver piping on black looks pretty cool, but
yeah, I know. Yeah, there was but yeah, that's really funny. That's an aspect that I did not know that that really, for all intents and purposes, logistics won the day here.
Yeah, and that if there's a lesson to be learned in the study of war, that's it. It's that weapon systems and don't win wars, and individual courage does not win a war. You need that, but D-Day was won by the people who figured out how to load the ships, how to get everything aboard, so that it would be getting off the ship at the right time, in the right place, in the right quantity, to the right people. Leadership and bravery were the guys who got the soldiers to get off the landing ships and go into combat. Couldn't have had one without the other. It doesn't work. But without that support, without that basis, bravery is pointless. Japan's problem right there. What did they do?
Because it's this fine line between bravery and stupidity, right?
Yep. Massive amounts of bravery, but no ability to back it up with the supplies and the resources.
Interesting. So we're 80 years later now, and there are ceremonies and there are things going on. I think most of the ceremonies are actually done for the day over there.
Yeah.
Why? How would I put it? I saw some troll on Twitter like this. And
Really?
the only reason I'm mentioning the troll is to be able to bring the question. Complaining. Why is the prime minister still there? The ceremony only lasts 3-4 hours like this. And then, it's like he could come back, because of the whole news that just exploded with regard to foreign interference. Saying the whole place, it's a dumpster fire here and he's going over there. It's like, it's the job.
Mm-hmm.
Why is it important for the people that happen to be hate watching us like this and that are going to complain about, the carbon that he used and he should be here instead because, we just found out this news. Why is it important for our prime minister to be, regardless of stripe, regardless of whether you like him or her or not, or them or not? Why is it important for us to actually be there on these commemoration days?
Well, the prime minister is there doing two things. He's representing Canada in probably one of the most important military ceremonies, memorial ceremonies in the last 25 years. He's also there with there are Canadian veterans they're getting very old now, but who made that trip and that pilgrimage back to that place. He's there because, and for any trolls who are complaining about this, they might want to remember that they have this ability to complain because of what those people did.
Thank you.
That's where it is. We would not be living in the world we're living in, good, bad, or indifferent, but certainly a hell of a lot better than it would have been without the absolute determination and sacrifice of hundreds of thousands of Canadians, men and women, who gave their all, either here working in factories, and there are a lot of, and building the weapons of war, or training people, or going overseas, or in the merchant marine, who are taking all this equipment and people across the Atlantic day after day after day, risking their lives. The soldiers who walked across the beaches into frigging machine gun fire to take these positions and end the war as quickly as they can. We stand on the shoulders of giants. And I think it's right and proper that we memorialize that and respect that.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I agree with you. Now, the prime minister was going to be attending two services. The first one, of course, for Canadian, but then he was going to go also to attend the ceremony for the landing at Omaha Beach as well. Can you tell us? I know we weren't involved in that one, right? Because that was the Americans, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Why would our prime minister go to that ceremony as well?
Well, first off, you got to remember that at this stage of the war, even though the Juno sector was the Canadian beach, Canadians were involved all the way across, as were Americans, as were British. It was an integrated Allied operation. There were Canadians on the beach at all five. There were Canadians supplying air cover, supplying fire support from the sea at all five beaches. It wasn't just we're over here, you're over there sort of thing. So there was a Canadian involvement across the board. But also, I mean, these are our allies. The United States at this time in the Second World War was the most powerful nation on earth. It's sort of things change. I mean, maybe it's not there now, of course, but its participation in the Second World War cannot be underestimated. I think it's important for our prime minister to be there to respect and honor those sacrifices as well, just as the Americans are at Juno to respect and honor our sacrifices. Right. It was a team effort. We were all in it together. So that'd be my answer.
Yeah. Now, another thing I had heard, because I was listening to a couple of things, was that on D-Day, when D-Day had come around, because the Americans have their version of, they won the war, which we know that's not exactly it wouldn't have been won without them, but they didn't win it for years. They kind of arrived in a little late. But at that point, it was more the British that were the biggest group there, not the Americans. Is that correct?
Not quite, actually. By this
Not
point
quite?
in the war,
Okay.
the Britain was a declining power.
Okay.
The Second World War was the swan song of the British Empire. They realized, well, it was by the Suez Crisis, they realized that they were no longer a major power, and they had to change their policies. But the understand also, like, while this is going on in Europe, and while this massive, huge invasion is happening in Europe, at about the same time, I think about a week after this, was it Peleliu? I think there was an American naval operation attacking about the same size that attacked over 3,000 miles out of Pearl Harbor and several other places to take out several islands in the Pacific in a chain. So the Americans at this point are the preeminent power on the planet. The Big Blue Fleet out in the Pacific is massive. Like, we're talking, by this point in the war, they have, I think, over a dozen aircraft carriers, heavy carriers, not to mention several dozen light carriers. They've got more cruisers. By one point in 1944, late 1944, the American naval aviation in the Pacific Navy in the Pacific had more destroyers than the Japanese did aircraft.
Okay.
So the amount of production that America is able to do is absolutely phenomenal. Their participation in the war, both in terms of direct combat, as well as the supplies and the weapons and the logistics and the oil too, because they're also the major oil power on the planet as well, cannot be underestimated. The Russian advance through Bagration all the way to the gates of Berlin, most of those guys were riding in the beds of Studebaker trucks. So there's a tremendous amount of American involvement throughout the world. So, and yeah, they were slow getting into it in the Second World War. Pardon me. And as a Canadian, I get a little jingoistic sometimes. And I think that they do tend to toot their own horn a little too much. Many of their stories that they tell in their movies are borrowed. Well, you say that kindly, from other incidents that happened around the world, like what was that, U-571 or whatever that movie was, but where they captured the documents on. Well,
Okay. Yeah.
Canadians did that. It was,
Yeah.
and actually the one Canadian who did that, he was naked when he did it, except for his sea boots, because he lost all his clothes swimming across the submarine to keep the hatch open with a handgun, so that they couldn't submerge, so they couldn't sink the sub, and they were able to get the Enigma codes. With the Enigma codes, they were able to read all the German codes. They could tell where the German subs were, so that meant that they could route their convoys around them. I mean,
Okay.
wars are. This is a fantastically complex undertaking, and it's, I don't know. As a historian, I just it's a brilliant 7-year period that like sometimes, what is it they say, like sometimes it takes years for something to happen. Sometimes years happen in a second. That this is one of those compressed time frames. We start the Second World War basically like we had we ended the First World War. Same weapons. Number 1 Mark III Lee Enfields, Lewis guns, biplanes. We end the war with nuclear weapons and jet fighters and radar and advanced communications. The spectacular growth in technological advancement throughout these 7 years is another wonderful story that needs to be shared as well. And D-Day is certainly as part of that, with the ability to coordinate and communicate. That really, and like, just going back to the Norman Summer for a second, the operational ingenuity that people were coming up with, like Guy Simmons and his command. Guy Simmons was one of our finest combat officers. Montgomery thought he was way better than Harry Crerar. In fact, when Harry got sick, he took over First Canadian Army from Harry.
Okay.
Operation Totalized Intractable. He came up with something called artificial moonlight, where they used massive, huge anti-air, like the spotlights, pointed up at the cloud base to illuminate the cloud base, like, how cities look like at night, so you can actually see what's going on, so that soldiers could move forward and do night attacks. I mean, this was the sort of ingenious planning that these guys were coming up with. It's really interesting.
Jeez. Wow. So much you never hear. That's so cool. Wow. I didn't think that we would be talking about someone swimming naked and creating artificial moonlight.
Well, it's
That's
kind of scary, I
amazing.
guess, if you're looking up out of the hatch of your U-boat and there's a naked guy with a Webley revolver standing there pointing it at you. You're like, what did we walk into?
See, there's an inappropriate joke there, but I won't make it because we're talking about D-Day.
Save that for later.
Something involving being happy to see me.
Well, it was the North Atlantic, so I'm sure that he might have been just a little bit short, but.
And we've gone off the rails, kids. All right. I was not expecting that. Well played, sir. For Canadians, how would I put it? Newer Canadians to Canada, who may not have, who don't have a family here unless they married into it, that have a military past associated with Canada. Why is it important for them to know this part of Canada's history?
Well, if I would say that, like, if you're looking at different ethnicities, we're virtually every ethnicity that is here in Canada today served during the Second World War. I think of, for example, Curve Lake, for example, the Anishinaabe community just near here. Literally every person of age to volunteer for the military volunteered for the military out of that community. They had to give up their status in order to do that. I mean, Canadians have like we've had people like even in the First World War. I mean, Lester Pearson, he was a pilot in I think it was a reconnaissance observation plane in the First World War. His back seater was Sikh. So we've always these people have always been part of our story and part of our national history. And I think that one of the things that we don't do a very good job at is recognizing that. Same thing like on Twitter, who are like, oh, military's getting so woke and all these gay people are going to make it all horrible. Oh, well, LGBTQ2S people have always been part of our military. Some of the bravest and most brilliant people I've served with were of that community. I mean, a nation's military is always a reflection of its entire society, good, bad, and indifferent. It's always going to be there. You're going to get some rednecks in there. You're going to get some real lefties in there. You're going to get people from a variety of backgrounds. If we say, well, this was a white war, well, that's not being truthful either, because there were tremendous numbers of Canadians of color who participated in the Second World War. We also have the burden of shame to bear with the way that we treated our Japanese Canadians. We did the exact same thing interring them as the Americans did. David Suzuki, for example, had to spend time in a bloody camp. So warts and all, I mean, this is part of our heritage. This is part of our history. And history doesn't rhyme, or doesn't repeat, but it does rhyme. Mm-hmm. There are always lessons that we can draw from the past about how we reacted to these situations, so we can apply those to the future. Mm-hmm. Times change. People don't. We've got the same brains as we did 10,000 years ago. So people's reactions, people's emotions, people's way that they process information never really changes. Certain circumstances change, but we can always learn from the past. I think it's important for that.
Mm-hmm. Yes, indeed. I concur there. When you mentioned Indigenous soldiers, and there's something that made me think of something, because I had heard on the news 2 days ago that the Indigenous soldiers, and I didn't know that they had to give up their status, I learned that today, um, were promised things if they served, and when they got back, they didn't necessarily get it. I believe farmland and stuff of the sort.
Mhm.
Could you speak a little bit to that? Could you?
They were, yeah, there were certain promises that were made, because it was, they, just like in the First World War, they were seen as being natural soldiers, and as being like people that the military really wanted to have in the ranks, and they certainly did serve quite honorably and quite well across the board in all services. But Canada, I mean, like we've got a fairly significant problem with our racial history, and in fact, during the Second World War, we also had some problems with just even with French as well as English, for heaven's sakes. I mean, there were in 1944, 1945, there were riots over conscription riots in Quebec, which damn near split the country. Mackenzie King did his best to try to hold that together and I think he probably did as well as he could with that situation.
Was he the one that said conscription if necessary, but not necessarily conscription?
Yeah, he tried to thread that needle, and all he did was wound up ticking everybody off. The conscripted soldiers who came up were told that they would be conscripted into national service, but they weren't going to be allowed to deploy they wouldn't have to deploy overseas. So they were called zombies, because they look like soldiers, they walk like soldiers, but they're not doing the same thing as soldiers. And to be quite honest, most of the Canadians overseas didn't want conscripts in their formations anyway, because they saw them as a danger and a liability. You don't want somebody, if you're in a very dangerous position, you don't want somebody beside you who you can't trust, or who you don't think might not have your back when the chips are down. So there were some issues with that. With respect to First Nations, I mean, it's the same with a lot of, I would say they suffered the same way they suffered before the war, and the same way they've been suffering all the way up to today with Grassy Narrows and things like that. And what's happening down in Sarnia, we still don't treat them very well, and we're not honoring our treaties with them. Black Canadians, the same way. Halifax, Africaville, was raised in order to build a goddamn park and a bridge at the north end of the south end of the Bedford Basin. Mm-hmm. And people were kicked out, and an entire community was destroyed and removed. Why? Well, they're black. Nobody really cared about that. We've got some serious baggage with the way that we treat people of color. We also have some serious baggage with the way we treat veterans, period. Yep. For example, it was only very recently that merchant marine sailors were even given a fraction of the respect and support that they had due based on their service in the Second World War. Mm-hmm. A warship can fight back. A warship has tools and training and crews and knows what to do. A merchant ship is moving along at sometimes 5 knots in a straight line. These guys are doing that back and forth every day for 5-7 years. A lot of them had several ships shot out under them, and they survived. And they got back aboard when they got into harbor. They lost pay when the ship went down, because their pay usually stopped when the ship sank. And then they had to re-enroll and sign up on another ship. And they did that for an entire war. We didn't even consider them veterans until recently. So, I mean, Veterans Affairs has some splaining to do, but
jeez. So let's bring this now to today. 80 years has gone by. Mm-hmm. Are there lessons from that era, that time, that day, that are important to retain and could be useful now, considering what we're going on in the world right now? Because this D-Day here is different. because it's it's the 80th anniversary. It's a big ceremony. That's one, but it is happening while one of our former allies at the time, I guess, Russia, is now at war with one of our current allies, Ukraine.
Mm-hmm.
And Volodymyr Zelensky was attending the ceremonies as well. It's, how would I put it? Like Russia recently had Victory Day.
Mhm.
And there were people from nations that had been involved on the Allied side at the time that did not attend
Mhm.
now. So things are different. It's not one big happy family anymore, or at least a family that agrees to, not talk about that issue at Thanksgiving when we get together, because Uncle Ron will go off. So given that we are in a situation of war, and a lot of people are saying that we basically already are in World War III, we just, a lot of people haven't acknowledged it yet.
Mhm.
How is this particular D-Day significant, and how could we look to those events to maybe help us get through the current moment?
I would say that the lessons that we had that we learned at D-Day. First off, let's face it, this is the last anniversary of D-Day where we're going to have participation with people who are actually there. So we're at one of these sort of bitter, sad inflection points where it is passing from the era of lived experience into the realm of history, just like Vimy Ridge is. It's so that all by itself, I think it's important that we commemorate it and honor it while we still have some people here to thank in the flesh. The lessons that we learned during that conflict was that national pride or expansion or jingoism is unacceptable. The war gave us, and the effort against fascism gave us the understanding that people are very important, more important than governments, more important than systems, more important than territorial expansion. We learned that the best way to secure those freedoms that we care about, that we believe are important, Charter of Rights and Freedoms enshrines them for us, is through, we have to defend them. We have to do it collectively. No nation can stand alone anymore. The world doesn't work that way. We are all interconnected, and we are all linked. What happens to one country affects all countries. So
Right.
if you've got a situation where one country is invading another country, well, that becomes everybody's problem for a variety of reasons. We need to remember what unites us and what we did together and what we could achieve by working together. We stopped the most brutal conflict in recorded history together. No nation did that alone.
Right.
Nations participated as best they could. Some of them did more, some of them did less. But the Poles were fighting alongside Canadians and one Canadian army. The Poles they also had destroyers at work. The Free French were there. The Free French landed on their own I think in the American sector, but they landed their own forces on Normandy as well. People from around the world, Indians, were fighting, not as much in Europe, because they're mostly fighting under SIM and with SIM and the British and Commonwealth forces and American forces in the Pacific. But the Australians, everybody, this was a global effort to stop a pervasive evil that everybody knew. And for once, I guess, for a very brief time, the world was united in a common cause.
Mm-hmm.
That's something to remember.
Yeah. Since you mentioned it, because we can't talk about World War II without talking about the common cause. and there are also links to today. 6 million, at least 6 million Jews were exterminated in camps. And right now, we are probably witnessing in Canada and other countries in the world the most insidious and fervent, for lack of a better word, rise of anti-Jew hate in a good long while, probably since the war.
Yep.
And we also have a generation of people now whose parents or grandparents may not have fought in these wars. So the Holocaust, like, my mom was born in 1939. So yes, she was a child during the war and that type of stuff, and probably doesn't remember much because she was young at that point. But my older aunts and uncles would be able to tell me a little bit, right? I'm one generation removed. But when you start becoming 2 or 3 generations removed, it seems that there's a lot of people that are not as aware of the history of the Holocaust and may not be aware of why it is the world said never again at the point, because we're watching this rise again. Are there any lessons with regard to that period and what we're commemorating today that we should be taking into the current political moment when it comes to standing up for our Jewish brothers and sisters?
Now that and I get your point. Now that it is passing out, even the Holocaust is sort of passing out from the realm of lived experience, like I said, into the realm of history. Well, that makes it just that much more important to be taught and to be integral to our education, to our public education system. The only way that you can confront hatred and bigotry and prejudice is through understanding. We like the Second World War. It wasn't until, like, people knew that there were problems, but it wasn't until the camps started to be liberated that people really, really understood the overwhelming evil that had happened. And I think in the last year of the war, that's when that started to take place. After the Russians first started to enter the German-controlled areas in Poland and places like that, when the Canadians and the Americans and the French and the British entered into southern France, where there were a few camps, and then certainly into Germany, where they started to liberate these camps. That's when the true evil import of what happened came through. We built an entire system of legal jurisprudence based on the shock and horror of what we witnessed. The idea that nations cannot be excused from doing this to each other, that people in power are responsible for their actions, that as an officer, as a soldier, you are responsible for your actions. That's there can be no collective punishment, but there also has to be specific punishment. Not everybody in Germany was anti-Semitic. There were a lot of German communists, a lot of German Jews, a lot of German homosexuals, people like that were in these camps as well. Yeah. So the hate is prevalent. I don't know. That's a tough one. You're right. We're seeing a rise. And we see a lot of anti-Semitism, and anti-Semitism as well as anti-Muslim sentiment as well. It's ugly. It is pervasive. The idea of the Holocaust, like even on Twitter, there are people who are openly expressing their affection for fascism and Nazi ideals. Right. I mean, as a vet and as a history teacher, I fully support their right to be a complete jerk and say stupid things like that. But it shows me is that, yeah, you're right. We are losing the plot here to a certain extent. With the message itself is getting diluted and is getting blunted through time and distance from the actual events. I don't know what to do other than say, as a history teacher, it's our job and our duty as educators to ensure that future generations understand these lessons. I mean, I wasn't born during the Second World War, of course. I mean, we're similar age. I mean, I was born in 1970. So for me though, I mean, let's face it. I mean, it's still, I was born like less than 25 years after the Second World War. So it really isn't that long ago from my perspective. Mind you, my kids are even farther removed from that, and their kids will be even farther removed from that. The Second World War to my grandchildren will probably be of less relevance to them than, say, the First World War is to me.
Right.
So that's why, as it passes into history, that's why I think it's important for us as a society to ensure that we enshrine these lessons in our curriculum and in our social structures, so that we pass on the basic message. You're going to have to, like, history is both the logical progression of certain ideas and facts, and X leads to Y leads to Z, but it's also emotional as anything. It is personal, it is visceral, and it is a very emotional experience. I don't know how to capture that and keep that alive, except through doing our best to ensure that we do recorded living history with the people who are still left, who endured these events or experienced these events, and maintain their perspective, and make sure that we teach that as best we can.
Okay, just 1 second. Now, kids, let me know. Paul just sent me a message saying that I needed to unplug my mic and try it again.
Okay.
And I saw that Kit Michael had said that my sound had gotten a little wonky there for a bit. One final question, I guess, and this one's more of a personal one. Why do you love history so much, and in particular military history?
That's a good question. I grew up in a family where I was exposed at a very early age to a wide variety of Canadian experiences that were really profound and unique. I mean, my grandfather was an old school bush pilot, and he also taught me how to garden too. But I learned from him a love of country, and a love and an interest in what he did and what he experienced. When I was a small kid in Lakefield, my grandmother's backyard neighbor was a veteran of the First World War, and he explained to me some of his experiences lived experience in Vimy Ridge. And 100 days, actually, because he started at Vimy, and he fought through, I think it was at Cambrai. He got shot and he got returned home. I don't know. I've always had a probably because I find our history fascinating. People think Canadian history is boring, but I think that's because they are not looking at it the right way. History is the story of how we got to the point we're at. It's navigating. It's navigating the human experience. I learned. I became fascinated by military history when I was in grade 9, and I had to do summer school down at Thomas A. Stewart in Peterborough for math. And I was there early, so I'd spend time in the library reading books on the Boer War. Because I found it fascinating. It's as a professional officer when I was in the Navy. Also, the military uses history not just as a way of ensuring social norms and things like that, but also it's a lessons learned operation, because the things that have happened in the past do influence the way that you process decisions, the way you make decisions, the way you decide how you're going to act in the future. The only way you can do that is by looking back and seeing how other people have managed similar situations and learn whatever lessons you can from it. Otherwise, you're just basically repeating everything over and over. Life's far too short to be making the same mistakes repeatedly. It's important to learn from them and do your best to ensure that, well, you're making different mistakes in the future.
In history as in life.
Mhm.
Wow. Kid Hugh, thanks so much.
No worries. It was fun.
That was brilliant. That was brilliant. I know that at the beginning, for the kids who might be watching or listening, that there was some tech things going on.
Sorry about
But that's not your fault. That's not you. That's not you. Don't apologize for
Okay.
that.
I thought
You
it
provided
was-
us content.
I thought it was
You
my
provided us content, and we must. I want to take a moment here to recognize and give a big shout out, and I hope the kids too in our audience too, to Mr. Grizzly, who did some of this remotely and did basically a yeoman's job trying to get us video and sound coordinated together and kept on improving the sound throughout the show. Because I don't know how it is he manages to do what he does, but I mean, this is what he does for a living, and he's a professional, he's an expert, and he makes it happen because today, we MacGyvered a lot of things to bring this to you. Kid Hugh, I never know what to say because I find that thank you for your service is just a lame sort of throwaway statement. I know that a lot of people really mean it. But I don't know what it is, if you have a preference of what it is that you, or if people in the military have a preference of what it is that they would like people to tell them when they want to thank them for their service. But whatever that is, I am saying it to you. And if you could tell us what it is, we would love to know. Something
Here's
that's
the
more
secret.
meaningful.
The full secret. I joined the Navy to pay for university.
Yeah, I think my brother may have
broke.
done that too. But
No,
still,
people who serve especially in the Canadian Forces, because it's all volunteer. If somebody wants to thank me for my service, I feel a little, I don't know, sometimes I feel a little awkward about it because it's like, for me, I'm like, well, I did it for my own reasons. And I know everybody signs up and does their thing for their own reasons. But if you want to thank a vet, write a letter to Veterans Affairs and tell them to work on their processes and support for Canadian veterans. I mean, I'm an old guy here, but I actually served in a position where I never was actually in combat. There are a lot of guys way younger than me who are really, really struggling and suffering and hurting hard, who need a hell of a lot of support and love. Some of the stuff that these poor guys and gals did in Afghanistan and around the world, and the things that they have seen, leaves scars that will be with them for the rest of their entire lives. Some of them are not coping well when they get home. They're not well treated by the Veterans Affairs, and they have a very difficult time getting the services they need. So anytime you can advocate for veterans, that's the best way to thank a vet.
all right. And a lot of those scars are not visible.
Nope. The worst ones are inside.
Yeah. So yeah, thank you. If you have a chance to see your dad today, thank him.
I will.
Please.
He's sleeping right now.
For us, and I do look forward to meeting him and working on that project so we can bring a bit of his story to the kits and document it somehow. And thank you for always being willing to come on the show and share your knowledge. I have an incredible amount of respect for all the content you have in that beautiful brain of yours. And the kits here too. I mean, we listen to these because I like to listen to these types of episodes on these days too, and and learn and see how people analyze it and talk about it, and we get detail and we learn interesting things. But when you talk to us about it, you give us down to the barrel sizes, right? that are being used. So you have so much detail that we can actually paint a picture in our mind, a full picture. And it's not that we can't when other people, historians, are talking about it and when I'm listening on other news, but they're broader brushstrokes and maybe, you know, the, 5 or 6 basic colors. But
What can I say? I'm a history
you
geek.
paint with all the colors when
Thank
you
you.
do it. So when we're listening to you, it's vivid. I mean, we had some kits in the chat here saying I could listen to him all day
Wow.
because you just your passion for it and that you know so much about it, and that you have all these interesting anecdotes, like the guy who had to swim naked. It's
That was leading
it,
seaman.
it,
I'll
it,
have to
it
remember his name. It was,
yeah.
was it, I want to say Sutcliffe, but I'm not sure. I'll have to look that up.
Okay. But to me, a sign of a good teacher is someone who can bring the material to life. And whenever we talk about this, and of course other things, but when we talk about this specifically, because when I asked you to talk on the asked you on the phone a few days ago if you wanted to do this, we talked for about an hour,
Yeah.
right, like this, and
Don't
about
get me
stuff. And you,
started.
no, but well, exactly. But you were talking to you mentioned it a little bit in the show there, but you were talking about how the Canadians and the Polish worked together,
Mm.
and I never learned that in my history class either. So it's just that you bring so much. You bring color, you bring texture, you bring like I said, we can close our eyes and see the movie projected in the back of our eyelids of what's going on when we listen to you talk. And it's I I'm the better for it, and I hope that our kids and that our audience really appreciate it. I know that our kids watching live did, because they make it very clear. But I am sincerely hoping, and yes, of course, it's self-interest. We get a benefit, but I'm hoping that this one is as popular as your last appearance on our show, because you bring it. You just bring it.
I was just thinking, if you guys are interested, it'd be interesting to do a retrospective at the end of victory in over Japan Day, and looking at the atomic bombing, the legacy of the atomic bombing, and how that literally shaped our modern world.
Yes. When is that?
That will be in when is that? That's September. It'll be this September. It'll be in the fall, anyways.
Okay.
Or no, next year. It'll be next year in the fall. It's September 45. Yeah.
Yeah.
August 45. August 45 is when they dropped the bomb. VJ Day was I think 3 September. But
okay, let's put it on the calendar. Let's do that. I'd be fascinated by that.
Right. Awesome.
All right.
Okay.
My friend, I love you.
Talk to you later.
You make the show better.
Oh, thank you.
How can you not love that man? Seriously, kids. Seriously.
Au revoir.
Okay. I do not know if we have Mr. Grizzly, because I know he's at work somewhere. But I'm going to start the extra, and if I need to stretch, don't worry, I will. So, kids and cubs, that's the end of this episode. Our very, very, very special episode. I always remember back in the 80s, we said, and today on a special episode of the Wonder Years or something, or a super special after school special. But no, this really was a special episode. Those who have been with us for a while have heard me say it before, even though I don't get to say it often. But I love it when we get to do a show that is also important. So not just the daily content that we put out, which is important enough. Don't get me wrong. I'm not devaluing our daily work. But when you get a topic, or when you have that's very important, significant, and when you have a guest, in cases when you have a guest that has accomplished something that is really spectacular, those are moments of great privilege for us, because they how'd you put it? You always want to do good work, but if we can leave things a little better than we found them, if we can find a way to increase understanding between people who are different, if there's a way that we can bring attention to voices who don't get heard, those specific moments, they're meaningful. They're meaningful. They when we're done an episode like this, when I sign off, my heart is more full than it usually is because the damn fam always fills my heart. So that goes without saying. But my heart really, really overflows because it's maybe selfish, but I feel like I get to give myself one or two pats on the back and say, you know what? You did something good today. You participated in doing something good. And that matters. That matters. It's, sometimes you got to keep it light, but sometimes you got to do the important stuff. And I can't think of anything. I mean, okay, maybe that was maybe a little exaggeration. I can't think of things. But of D-Day, and observing D-Day and observing the sacrifice of so many and so much loss and pain isn't something important. I don't know what is. So I'm this, despite the frustrations, despite the tech stuff, despite the couple of times you saw me go, because at first I wasn't able to bring you the show that I wanted, but we did get there. It's a privilege. That's all I can say. It's a privilege, and I'm happy I get the opportunity, and I'm happy that through this venture that Mr. and Grizzly and I started, that I, people like Kit Hugh, who is my friend, and I love him very much. But we met through this, have crossed my path and are able and willing to help us by sharing their knowledge and their expertise like this. So I'm in a really, really, really good mood. And I'm vibing. And I hope you are too, kids and cubs. All right. That's the end of this episode of the Daily Beaver Morning Show, D-Day edition. And we hope that you love this because I really loved making this for you and bringing this to you today. Of course, sharing is caring and word of mouth is priceless, so please let your peeps and poops know all about us. Oh, I see Kit Pete has joined us in the chat today. Hello, my friend. Word of mouth is priceless, so tell everybody. And if you would like to make sure that you do not miss an episode, you don't have to, thanks to the Ray Girl. She sponsored our pod page. That's podpage.com/TheTrueNorthEagerBeaver, lowercase letters with a hyphen between each one of those words. And if you make your way to that site and click on subscribe, when we have something fresh off the bandwidth, it will come directly to you, so you won't have to miss a thing. If you would like to support us in other ways, well, then you need to make like Kit Lane and go to the True North Eager Beaver Media Incorporated YouTube page, which the kits tell me has had even more subscribers since we have been taking on the show today. I think we're at, well, my screen says 978, but it may even be more than that. Maybe the kits can give me a total while we're there. But if you are there, we are trying to get to 1,000 before Canada Day, so that we can further monetize this. So please, if you can help us, we would like that. Go to our page, click like, share, subscribe, and that would make us very happy. If you would like to support us in other ways, kids and cubs, the way you can do that is to go to our coffee page, where you will find the Eager Beaver Lodge Emergency Hydration Fund, which is our fancy word for our tip jar. If you like our content and you would like to encourage us to do more, well, you can do that by buying us a cup of coffee or a Guinness for Mr. Grizzly, a Caesar, or a hot chocolate for me. That, it helps us produce, write, deliver the show, market it, and, we always appreciate a little love. Because democracy is something that you do. Like Kit Hughes said in the conversation, take the time to write some letters to veterans organizations, to the Minister of Veterans Affairs, to your MPs, and ask that they keep that not that they keep on that they do right by our veterans and that they keep doing so. All right. Oh, Kid Aussie Pete, thank you for the super chat donation. That's so sweet of you. Thank you. Much appreciated.
Sorry, I was so long being away. Major technological issues here at work, at my job, and my laptop wouldn't boot up because it won't charge. So I had to use my phone, and I lost connection. So it's been a heck of a day.
Mr. Grizzly, I was telling the people on the chat, the kits, I don't know if you were able to hear it, but the heavy lifting you did today to make this happen.
Yeah. It's just the job.
I'm very grateful. Thank you. You saved the show. You saved the show today. Kits and Cubs, because democracy is something that you do, please write your veterans organizations and ask that they do better. Make sure that they take care of them and that our veterans get that which is due and that which was promised, that we deliver on our promise for the service that they gave us. All right. Also, because democracy is something that you do, if you live in Alberta, please get involved in the NDP leadership race so that you have the best candidate possible for the general election when it comes along. And if you are in Saskatchewan, New Brunswick, or the province of British Columbia, please get involved. Call your local electoral body and see if you can volunteer at a polling station this year. We need good people to be able to do that. And it's a wonderful experience. I've had the chance to do it. And there is nothing better. There are a few things better than on voting days, seeing people come to the voting booth excited to vote and wanting to vote. And it renews some patriotism and love for the country. So please do that if you can. From the Beaver Lodge, this is your Eager Beaver saying it could be a tough world out there, so please be kind to and gentle with yourself. If we still have Mr. Grizzly, do you have some words of wisdom, sir?
Yeah, when technology fails and goes sideways and creates massive issues, try not to get too upset. Just breathe through it, get it done. Everything will work out in the end. It'll all be okay. Nobody's going to be harmed at the end of the day. So try not to let your emotions get the better of you, which, because I woke up feeling great, other than being tired, which is standard for me, but woke up feeling great, in a great mood, with no anxiety, no depression, just feeling like, whatever comes my way, I'll deal with.
Right.
It's because of that I've been able to deal with all the technological issues today. So, yeah, remember to try and breathe. Remember to try and relax, and remember all the bad stuff that happens is only temporary. And when it's technology, don't worry about it. Life goes on.
That's a lesson I need to learn. All right. Well, then, from the Beaver Lodge, it could be a tough world out there. Please be kind to and gentle with yourself. Mr. Grizzly, please cue the cock.
Give me a second here. I'm doing this from my phone, so here we go.
You are listening to a True North Eager Beaver Media Incorporated podcast. The True North Eager Beaver podcasts are proudly brought to you by our founding sponsors, the Misfit Mysteries from Corvid Moon Publishing, your source for science fiction, fantasy, and cozy mysteries featuring a broad diversity of characters, CanadianTarot.com, your uniquely Canadian online eclectic tarot community, and the Peppermaster, Hot pepper sauce is made from farm fresh ingredients to thrill your taste buds and expand your mind. We are grateful to the Crier Media Network for its support, Pete Jarvis for our artwork, and Paul Joseph Something for our opening and closing sequence music.
I don't know how. I'm going to see if I can end this properly here. I'm having a heck of a time doing it. When all the technology goes sideways. So, here we are.